Good morrow and good day. It's Jack here, the DM for Slice and Dice and for the Menelance campaign. Here with you today for a very special little video, which is the first in hopefully what will be a series of campaign diaries and Q&As to follow along with the campaign. So if you haven't seen any of the Menelance campaign, obviously you should check it out. Sessions 0, which was character creation, 1 and 2 are now all up on Twitch. In fact, I think character creation has now dropped off of Twitch as it's been too long, but don't worry, because you can catch up and find all of the episodes on our YouTube channel, that's Slice and Dice. In fact, there's a link to that called Catch Up right at the bottom of the Twitch page. So yeah, the campaign diary, what I was going to do for this was basically give you an insight into what was behind the DM screen, what I was doing, what was going on in my head during the first session and the second session as well. Might as well do 2 in one go, as I'm a week behind currently, and also give you a bit more context and background as to what's been happening in the world of the many lands, just to give you a bit of trivia really. There's more information on particular entities, like for instance the entire pantheon of the Great Eight, which is the main pantheon of gods and deities that is permeates throughout this world, and you can find all the details about that, as well as the Burakrin Republic, which is the nation in which the first part of this campaign and for the foreseeable future, unless they decide to go gallivanting off in the future. You can find more information about all of those things and more on the World Anvil page, which is also linked on the Twitch page below. Probably enough plugging done there. Anyway, this is also not just a campaign diary recording and a live stream. This is also a Q&A for you guys. So if you've got any questions about anything at all to do with the many lands, I'm here to answer them live on the channel. All very exciting. So where to start? Really, well, I guess starting at the beginning would be a very good place to start. Now, just before the first session got underway, I made an announcement about faked dice, and yes, there is information about that below as well, but basically it's a way for you guys, the audience, to get in touch and interact with the game, and to sort of change things and change the layout of the world for the players in some small way. I thought it'd be a good bit of fun, good bit of engagement, and I hope you think so too. So basically, your suggestion for what for a world-changing event, it could be something big, could be something small, or something in the middle. Could be anything at all. Just anything that you think would count as fake dice. And then that your suggestion will then be added onto the dice, which would be a d20. So once that d20 has been filled up with 20 ideas, that's hopefully from 20 different people, I'll then roll the dice during a session, and whichever one is rolled, that particular suggestion will occur at some point in the world. So that's why it really is quite exciting, and the players are bricking it about that, which is in some ways, as a DM, it's sometimes good, sometimes bad to see the players feeling a little bit edgy and nervous about things. So yeah, if you have any suggestions for fake dice, comment in the chat here. Also, you can do it throughout the week as well on any of the social media. You can do it at slice&d6, or even if you don't, use the hashtag fake dice, and we'll look it up and I'll add it to the dice. So once the campaign got underway, I did a little spiel at the beginning, explaining a bit more about the many lands in general, about the different nations that are involved, just other details like that that I think you need to know before jumping into the campaign. Now, I'm not going to do the whole reading for you now, because it's over a page long. And I've already done it during session 1, so you can catch up with it there. But I can summarize it for you. Basically, I wanted to sort of touch base with, if you see on the map just behind me and around me, I wanted to touch base with all of the different nations that are labeled throughout there. So you can see to my right is Isk. It's backwards. It's right on the screen, but it's left. I've got to point left. So you can see Isk, just there. And above that, you've got the Crowflies, and behind me, you've got Burakrin and Rachir. You've got Loranlas over there. This is really difficult. You've got Ansravar below, and you've got Cathar that way. So all of the different nations, and off the screen, there's also the Forgotten Lands, the Provincia, and Eruskin. It's a good job that I remember some of these names, right? So I wanted to just kind of give an idea of the scale of the world and the different kind of folk and that are there, and also what is currently going on in the world for those particular nations. So I touched base with all of those, and also introduce the main thrust of things in Burakrin, which is where the campaign is set to start. Because obviously it's useful to know about the actual nearby geography that you live in. So basically, Burakrin and Rachir, two nations who are separated by two mountain ranges, the Rachna Mountains and the Rachgarat Mountains. I struggle saying that one. So the Rachna and the Rachgarat Mountains. They're the only ways to by land to cross over the border into those two different countries. And currently they're sort of locked in a civil war. Sorry, not a civil war. They're locked in a kind of cold war, actually, with each other. In that it's not open conflict, but they are being hostile towards each other, and they were trying to sort of outmaneuver each other in terms of pushing for resources, land, and so on. So what's happened is that in Burakrin, which is mostly a dwarven and human populace, they have the Republic has decided, the Senate, should I say, of the Republic has decided to basically devote a lot of their resources, at least in terms of manpower and military, to guarding the border. So for the army, that is patrolling the border, patrolling the mountain ranges. They've got watchtowers and all that sort of thing, keeping an eye on things up there. The navy is then blockading the river, which unfortunately you can't see because I'm currently in the way of that. But anyway, you can see a nice full picture of the map on the World Anvil page as well. But anyway, there's a natural river going up the Westuary, it's called, because it's not east, it's west. The Westuary, that's currently being blockaded by the Burakrin Republic to stop resources and ships moving to and from Rachir. So they're kind of quite aggressive on the border, like aggressively maintaining that border. The Republic has also introduced laws that all Dragonborn citizens now need to carry identification on them so that they can prove that they are citizens of the Republic and not of the Dragonborn Kingdom, because Rachir is a Dragonborn Kingdom, and as such, most of its residents are all Dragonborn. So there's a kind of sense of paranoia with thinking that there are spies from Rachir that are moving into Burakrin and like looking to what's going on with them and trying to sabotage their military efforts and so on. And you may be wondering, well, why are these two nations opposed and fighting each other, other than the fact that they're neighbours? I mean, England, France, just England, Wales, England, Scotland, England. Just everyone seems to hate their neighbours. Geographically, there's this real tribalism in the world, but apart from that, there are much deeper reasons, and deeper. It's a bit of a pun because it's a fight for resources essentially, because underneath the Rachna and the Rachgarat Mountains are plentiful resources of minerals, and particularly bronze and iron and gemstones, all that kind of fancy stuff, which both sides want to get their hands on. So what's happening is the two of them are competing underground, trying to it's what I like to call a race to the bottom. They're all trying to get as much resources out of that mine as quickly as possible, just digging their way through and trying to pull everything out of there and not let the other side have it, basically so that they can have it. So that's kind of snowballing. It's kind of like an arms race, but it's a mining race. And that's kind of stoking the fire of this Cold War between the two civilizations currently. So our players finding themselves in the middle of this with all these goings on, and that's just between two societies. We've also got lots of different organisations who I also introduce in the intro spiel, such as so from ISK you've got loads of guilds. The ISK is essentially a desert nation that is run by an oligarchy, which is a small group of people. It's essentially the leaders from all of the main guilds within ISK. So you've got the Golden Guild, which is all merchants. You've got the Aelin, which are smiths. The Red Suns, which are mercenaries. And the Masons Guild, masons and builders. The Alchemist Guild, wizards and potion makers and magic item makers, and Winds and Wings, which is kind of couriers and printing press. They're all kind of vying for control of ISK, and they are currently locked in an oligarchical agreement between them. So you've got all those, and you do sometimes have members of those guilds moving over to Burakrin for trade and so on. Also within Burakrin, you've got the Order of the Broken Fang, who I will talk about a bit later because we introduced one of their characters in the first session. You also have a couple more which I can't tell you about yet for narrative reasons. And there's also the Red Mages of Kothar, who mysterious red-cloaked wizards who seem to be up to something, but nobody's quite sure what they are doing, but they are most certainly powerful and not to be underestimated. So I introduced most of these little themes. There's a lot to take in, and then jumped in with the beginning of the campaign. Now, of course, as a dungeon master, you can only start a campaign once, and so when you're going to go start a campaign, you kind of want to. You've only got one shot at it, so you kind of want to do it justice and do it in the right way. One of the classic starting points for a dungeon master for a game of Dungeons and Dragons would be starting the party in a tavern. Like, you start in a tavern. Classic setup. It's really good to introduce social setting and basically to put all the party together in one go. And I kind of wanted to do that, but I wanted to put a bit of a spin on that because I felt like it'd be a bit too convenient to have all of the players just suddenly just meet at this tavern. I wanted to give them reasons as to why they were going to this tavern, and perhaps we pick up with the characters before they get there, so they've already got their reasons for being there, and then becoming a party is just kind of incidental afterwards, rather than you kind of railroading them into it. There's a debate as to whether you probably are going to be railroading very, very slightly at the beginning anyway, that you can't completely avoid it because you need to make these people all work together. But equally, the players have to have that mindset going into it. We're having this discussion. You can't have players who want to be lone wolves because it's a team game. You guys as players are all playing together as a team. It doesn't work if you're going off on your own and not involving the rest of the group. And some players do that a lot better than others. So my kind of spin on that was, I think definitely took some influence from films, like from books and so on. Like, I think there was definitely a bit of the Lord of the Rings in there, and particularly I think for my first little segment of session one, big influence came from Skyrim, because that was good fun to start with. And it's interesting that they start. Skyrim and Oblivion, Elder Scrolls 4 and 5, both start with the protagonist being arrested, essentially being imprisoned. So I wanted to kind of, I liked that kind of mechanism because I like the idea that you that you can't just venture off straight away, that you have to sit there and you have to take in some information, and then something happens, and then that prompts you to carry on. So I did kind of push James's character Seth into this a little bit. I knew that he was going to be playing a rogue, so instantly criminal, thought he's going to be doing something shady. This is just cause for him to be arrested anyway. He's got a cool thing going on with his character. All the players have cool things going on with their characters, but I'll mention James first and Seth first because he's the first character we come across in the campaign. Basically, his story is that he wants to he's essentially been contracted to hunt down dangerous monsters, and he gets a particular contract. He goes off, he finds that monster, slays it, takes whatever is needed from it, and brings it back for payment. Because his character isn't motivated by money. It's more about the challenge. It's more about him becoming more powerful and facing things of equal power, or even better, higher levels of power than him, to test him and make him rise to the challenge. He's constantly wanting to get better and improve himself in his martial prowess and his combat ability. So which is a really cool idea. I thought, yes, we'll run with that. So he has gone to Burakrin, and particularly around near the mountains, because he's been looking for a basilisk, which may be happening in the not too distant future, because the party seem to be moving in that kind of direction anyway. So that wasn't the best reason. That wasn't giving me an entire justification for him being arrested. However, he does have a privateer pirate background, and he even gave his character description as wearing this tricorn hat, and he's got this long coat on. It's very much of that kind of naval influence. So I kind of decided that, okay, he's going to get arrested here. The guards, being paranoid anyway, given the current climate, will place him under arrest for questioning, believing him to be a pirate. And if he is, he will be deported. So that's the reason that he ends up being arrested, along with the other characters within the prison wagon. So as in Skyrim, and I think it was in Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring as well. So you've got so we have the center of the action. We start off the action even by picking up at night. It's raining with these guys in the prison wagon, and there's some other characters in there with him. These are all NPCs, they're not players. Could have put another player in if it made sense to put them in because of their backstory, or for their goals. But given that the only other player I had for that session was Dan with Malar, who's a well-known figure within Burakrin. He's a scholarly Loxodon gent, and there's not many Loxodon around in general. It wouldn't make sense for him to be arrested right at the beginning. So I'd written this all out before the session. I'd planned this all out, even given the characters' names. Probably a big mistake, because you don't need to give all the characters' names, because I mean, odds are if I hadn't, they probably would have asked the names, but as they didn't, I actually ended up putting a lot more information than I needed down. But basically, the other prisoners that Seth had with him on the prison wagon were important in some capacity, with the exception of one who was the crazy kind of feral man, who was just there for a bit of colour and to just to show that they do catch actual criminals and people in need of psychiatric help that are a danger to society, rather than just arresting innocent people. Now, of course, in addition to the feral human, there was a halfling called Royston the Bag, which one of the other players, Bart, particularly liked the name of and commended me on my naming of characters. Royston the Bag was basically, he would say that he is a honest businessman. He's a merchant. He owns a shop in Morning called Royston's Rags and Riches, which is nice. It is a general store. However, he is a complete crook, and in fact, all of the wares that he sells essentially is stuff that he's nicked out, or that he has taken from the remains of the recently departed. Yes, he's a grave robber. So again, not a particularly nice chap, but very important plot-wise, and that didn't become at all clear until it became abundantly clear later on. Another character, the other prisoner, the third prisoner, was a copper dragonborn called. Well, actually, she wasn't named, but I can tell you her name was Teller, and she has an interesting past and backstory. Unfortunately, I can't talk much about that, but clearly is a rogue, and clearly has some tricks up her sleeve and was more than able to handle the coming combat at the beginning. So basically, having Seth, the PC, plus these other characters all arrested, basically meant that we could then, through conversation, get a bit more texture about the world. Also, kind of was also dropping in about the Dragonborn being basically profiled by the Republic Guard for their appearance. Teller was arrested because of problems with her papers, even though she protests that she is a citizen of Burakrin. She's lived here all her life, and her brother has a place of his own which she lives in Rundar, the capital. So I wanted to drop that in quite early on, that there is this tension and that Dragonborns are being profiled and not being treated particularly well, even though it's somewhat dubious as to whether Teller is such an innocent character. I like to think that generally people aren't black and white. They are shades of grey in terms of morality. There's good and evil in everyone, and I kind of wanted to show that in this, and really sort of, I think it makes it tougher for the players then to make decisions on whether they do one thing or another, because whether to trust one character over another. And you saw Seth had this problem in the upcoming combats, because what happened next was that this basically giant being of just earth and rock crashed through from underneath the carriage, just came up through it, breaking it in half. The driver and the horses scattered at the front, and we never saw them, while the rest splayed out off the path on the ground and were then face to face with this thing. And I think one of the lessons I wanted one of the things I wanted to put out there for the players, a lesson for players, is that you can't always win a combat. Sometimes the discretion is the better form better part of valor. And I wanted to put that in early on, because I knew James had played before, as had Dan. I knew they both were experienced players. I knew that I could trust them with this, and it would then demonstrate to some of the newer players that sometimes you've got to think about combat. You can't just rush in, just swinging your sword around and just carve your way through every scenario. Sometimes combat isn't the best solution. So what happens so basically what they were up against was a being that could have easily killed all of the characters there quite easily. However, it was there for a mission, it was there for a reason, and it was there for the halfling Royston the Bag. Why? Well, that would be spoilers, so I can't really say. So this being then picks up Royston the Bag and starts carrying him away, while the others are kind of helpless. I don't think Seth actually threw out an attack against this thing, because he just knew, James knew, if I attack this thing, it will probably kill me, because it's much more powerful than I am. And he would have been right. But there also was an evidence chest with all of his belongings, other than the stuff that he had managed to sleight of hand onto his person, which in this case was thieves' tools, so no weapons. All of it was in an evidence chest, which was on another side of the map, it was some way away, and had the monster between himself and the stuff. So that, again, another little conundrum for him. And then there's the guard, and to be fair, Seth did very well with trying to convince the guard to come and help. The guard was in two minds, because as far as he saw, yes, they were under attack by this monster, but again, no way he was going to defeat this thing. But equally, he's got prisoners running around. What's a guy going to do? Is he going to die trying to fight a monster, or is he going to lose his job and let the prisoners escape, or is he going to go somewhere in the middle? And that's kind of where he went. He didn't attack the monster, however, he was very concerned with where the prisoners were going, particularly the Dragonborn, and went after her, made a beeline for her. She decided to hide, but as we saw from being a rogue, she had managed to sneak a dagger onto her person and waited for the right moment. And once the debris had cleared and the monster had left with his prize, the guard was then swiftly executed by Teller, which Seth was like, "What? What?" He was like, "What are you doing?" But again, Teller wasn't going to go back to prison. She wasn't going to be taken away, and I think inevitably that's what would have happened. No matter how persuasive Seth may have been, I think the guard, that was his livelihood, that was his job, and he didn't particularly like the prisoners anyway. As far as he saw, they were criminals and they deserved to be taken for justice at the High Court of Burakrin, which is where they were heading. So, so then with the guard dead, that leaves and the crazed feral man got smushed by this being just got stomped on it. That was, I think, what kind of demonstrated, yeah, this thing is serious. So he got stomped and died instantly. So that just left the Dragonborn, Teller, and Seth, our PC. And Teller said she's going to go her own way, being all roguey and mysterious, and said, "Don't follow me, but give me my stuff back." She didn't take her horn back, because she had a horn which was actually a finely crafted bone horn with some like bronze inlays on it. That was actually that's an ornament which belongs to the Dragonborn Kingdom of Rachir. Nearly all citizens have one of those bone horns on. So the fact that she has one maybe contradicts the fact that she says that she's from Burakrin. But I guess that will maybe explained later on. Keep that in mind. So Seth actually managed to keep a hold of the horn because he took it out before, but then he took it out along with the rapier. But Teller only asked for the rapier back, forgetting about the horn. Admittedly, I think I forgot about the horn, but actually it's a nice little plot hook for later on. So we'll see what happens with that. Anyway, he was then left on his own. You may be wondering, so how did the tavern bit fit into this? It's a good question, because I could have actually left it there and he would have been fending for himself in the middle of a rainstorm in the middle of the night, which is not a great place to be. I mean, he's got dark vision as a half-elf, so that's something, but still, yeah, it's not the best position to be in. But with a bit of Deus Ex Machina, there was in fact a sign pointing towards an inn, which had got a bit destroyed by these recent events, but it was nonetheless there, and he followed it, and sure enough ends up at the tavern known as Flaming Jack's. Now so I like to work my own ideas, and I like to draw inspiration from other places, and one thing I would definitely recommend if you are DMing a game yourself is to use, if you haven't looked at it before, go and have a look at drivethrurpg.com. It's really good for finding inspiration, finding like PDFs of adventures, that loads of different adventures that people have written, not just for Dungeons and Dragons, for Pathfinder and for other applicable systems. So so there's one particular one I found which I found quite useful, and I definitely taken some influence from that for Flaming Jack's. Basically, Flaming Jack's is a tavern that's run by quite a character, a very chatty gnome known as Jackburn Candlecorn Winklebottom, or just who is the namesake of the inn of Flaming Jack's, and he invented his own version of Sambuca called Flaming Jackbuca. And when Seth entered there, I was going to introduce the inn, and there's a lot of people there. There's the merfolk, the mermaid who performs for everyone, like a ribbon with the pink hair and stuff, who doesn't seem to speak. There's something interesting there. There's the bouncer on the door, called who actually didn't introduce himself, but he's called Grunt, and he is he may be a half-orc, but he's not your typical half-orc. There's a lot more to him than that. And then you've got, as I said, the proprietor and barman, Jackburn, running the bar, and quite an eccentric character, but also looking to get some help with a couple of things. There was a couple of posters up, one about Flaming Jack's Challenge, which is a drinking competition, and then one for Monster Hunters Wanted. Now this one, I knew straight away that Seth was going to be interested in. Monster hunting, you say? This is what I do. So that was there, ready to go. And I also had the And then the Flaming Jack thing, the Flaming Jack Booker thing, that's more for colour. But hey, he went straight for it, and it was helped along by a little dwarf, a Provincian dwarf with tribal tattoos all over him and bare-chested and kind of that typical Conan the Barbarian kind of feel, called Mace Flint. Mace Flint of House Flint, of Clan Flint even. That's what, not House Flint, clans in the Provincia. Anyway, basically being quite antagonistic, not only towards Seth, but before that to Malar, Dan's character, who is a Loxodon cleric. That's an elephant man cleric. So he's a scholar, but also he's a devout religious figure, and is well known actually. He's a deacon Malar Shade Creek, who is actually known around Burakrin. He's got a bit of reputation. He is he's probably the only Loxodon of high status within Burakrin, so definitely a recognisable figure for that. However, Mace Flint and his cronies have not heard of him, and unfortunately Malar is particularly boring in conversation, and this one thing led to another, and the players basically were ended up in a bit of an altercation with him by failing the drink. Well, Malar didn't even take part in the drinking competition, and Seth failed so badly that he actually projectile vomited onto Mace Flint, who was just necking his drinks and doing a great job of it. I was behind the screen. I rolled 2 20s in a row for him necking his drink. It was ridiculous. Whereas Seth rolled a natural 1, and projectile vomit happened, and then it was just a lovely moment with Dan trying to, Dan with his character Malar trying to resolve the situation, trying to clean sick off of this guy with water from the aquarium, the tank that the mermaid had been performing. Just a lovely little thing. So anyway, after all that happens, all that excitement, there's a real plot hook, which is the monster hunting. As I said, I just knew that was going to be bait to reel in Seth with. Anyway, it turns out that the monsters are in fact giant rats in the basement in the cellar, of the tavern, and both players and their characters were like, rats, really? That tough? Boy, were they wrong. As I actually realised afterwards that they're not the typical giant rats from the monster manual in Dungeons and Dragons. They were in fact they were a lot more deadly. They had a much better armor class, so they were much harder to hit, and that proved to be a real stumbling block, particularly because Seth couldn't hit anything, and very quickly went unconscious, which again, a little bit awkward in your first game, particularly as I know James has an idea of where he wants his character to go right to the highest level. So in the first session to have him basically die is a little bit worrying. And that wasn't supposed to be the deadly part of the encounter. Hello, Dan, playing games. You dangerous rats, and you pushed Seth down the stairs. Yep. As I said, the proprietor was very keen to have these rats dealt with, which is another reason why he wasn't going to let them. Hi, Dan. He wasn't going to let the guys have a long rest and wait overnight, because this rat problem was just getting worse, and he just wanted to get taken care of quickly and quietly so that his place basically didn't get shut down. So, and I think also one of the things I've noticed as a player in campaigns before is, or even as a DM actually in previous campaigns, is noticing that sometimes players will rely on the long rest a bit too much, and will try and sort of spam the long rest to just get all their spells back, get their health back, and I completely get why. But I think when I've DM'd before, I've perhaps been a bit too easy to take a long rest, particularly in a dangerous area. So I wanted to make sure, level 1. I wanted to make long rests do happen, but they're not going to happen all the time. You can't just always go for a long rest and then do another part of the adventure. You can certainly try, but in this particular instance, given the character's motivation, the NPC that's hired them, He wanted that done now, and so a short rest, fine, but a long rest just didn't seem to make sense to me, or for that character's rationale. But that did mean that because they'd already had the altercation with the dwarves, that then Malar was short of spells, that didn't go particularly well. But fortunately, they did manage to defeat the rats in the end. Okay, so Seth went to 2 failed death saves, nearly died. He's certainly going to appreciate now that he's got to level 2, but still, that was pretty touch and go. And as much as anything, when you introduce a new character, you don't want a new character to die in their first session. Even like as a DM, it doesn't matter how realistic or how dangerous you want the world to be. It seems a bit of a waste if you introduce a character and it gets killed within the first session. To me personally, that's just my view. So I didn't want his character to die, but I wasn't going to lie and fudge the roles. I wanted to, make this an honest and open sort of campaign. So, play things out how they would happen. And, unfortunately, characters do die. That is the world of D&D. Your character will not last forever. It will eventually die or retire or whatever. Things happen. So yeah, a tough encounter, but they rose to the challenge and they got through it, and they were justly rewarded. And in fact, the owner did feel a bit bad because he basically pushed Seth down the stairs, which is why he went unconscious, because he wanted to keep the rats out of the bar. He had said beforehand, I don't want the rats coming in the bar. I think there was maybe a miscommunication, because I had envisaged it that basically on the other side of the bar, just tucked around a corner from the bar, was a trapdoor on the floor, and that would lead directly into the cellar. And I think that James thought that there was a trapdoor, stairs down, then another bit, and then the cellar, which I definitely didn't say, but he thought that's what was happening. So I think that's part of the reason why he decided to back out, rather than letting Malar, Dan's character, DK's character, going in. So it was a touch and go situation, but they managed to get out of it without any help in the end. Okay, so Jackman ran down the stairs at the end with a health potion, which would have saved Seth's life, of course, but it was kind of his fault that he was in that situation in the first place. So the guys. You thought we were... it's okay. So Dan, you thought we were inside a corridor as well. Yeah, I don't think I made that particularly clear. I think there was a bit of a miscommunication on that one. But anyway, there was a lot going on. So that happened, and the guys were justly rewarded and took a nice long rest overnight until morning. And that's where we picked up session 2. And in session 2, by the end of session 1, so once they defeated the rats, I did say that the third rat escaped, and it pushed through some barrels, and then Malar pushed through the barrels and found that there was this, there was an archway leading into a darker area, subterranean level through there, which he couldn't see into because he doesn't have dark vision, but there was definitely another sort of level, there was definitely more rooms and more ways to travel down that way, and they've and given everything that was happening, I think he just wanted to go and grab Seth and go to bed, and they'll deal with that later. So so they left that, and then in the morning, more of the backstory stuff came up. Now with Malar, I haven't talked about his backstory yet, but as I said, an interesting chap, probably the only Loxodon in the Burakrin Republic, so he stands out like a sore thumb. And he was tasked with going to the inn because he was meant to meet an ambassador there, Ambassador Helene Grenforth, who is a young lady from the Crowflies, as part of one of the liege houses there. In the Crowflies, there are 3 liege houses. They're the most powerful and biggest houses, and they control the main cities. They are the Grenforths, the Rookwoods, and the Bronze. So the Grenforths are the furthest west. You'll find them actually, they're just where the Y is on Campaign Diary. That's where Grenforth is. It's the closest to Burakrin, and historically they've been allies with Burakrin. But given the recent conflict with the Dragonborn Kingdom, Lady Helene, as a philanthropist herself, wants to go there and wants to go and travel around Burakrin and just go and help the needy. And I think particularly as an ambassador, just wants to see what's going on with Rachir and try and offer help as best she can to refugees and so on. Just basically to highlight the cause. And Malar was, as a bit of a social recluse, was almost jokingly hired to attend with her and accompany her along this trail along Burakrin, just to give him some more experience of talking to people, but also to promote the Eight, because they wanted to have a representative of a religious order going on a philanthropic mission. I mean, that's that's your target audience for a religious order, right? You're the meek and the needy. You want to go and say, oh yes, Festir is with you, and particularly given that Malar is a follower of Festir. Festir is basically of the life domain, so he is the god of abundance and the god of, you could say, festivals. Basically, the god of food and joy, and I think, abundance is probably the best word. I kind of compare him to Buddha, Festir. Basically, Festir is the one who goes to parties and has a great time and overindulges on things. So having an abundance, having too much of things. So, of course, that, again, makes sense with wanting to go on this journey. They want to... promoting the will of Festir, and obviously sharing food and bread and water with all of these needy people. That makes total sense. So he was due to meet Lady Helene Grenforth at the inn as part of her tour around Burakrin, and she hadn't turned up. So obviously he started asking a few questions, and then I was going to use that as a bit of a hook for another story in the campaign, which I then had time to write a bit on before session 2. Basically, the missing ambassador. Where is she? So I could then introduce some other characters to try and help them in this endeavour, and they kind of worked out the players. They kind of compromised, which was it was really nice to see, actually, being that how they work together on this. That Seth wants to find a basilisk, and Malar wants to find a missing ambassador, and the two of them kind of both ended up going in the same direction, because I think Seth said that, well, if the ambassador is supposed to be coming from the south, then I'll go with you to the south, and we'll see if there's along the route, if there's anywhere where we would find basilisks and stuff, and perhaps we'll find some people to help us with this endeavour. I think James had also kind of gone with 2 players. A basilisk is going to be too hard. Like, we need to have more people just in case things go wrong, and some provisions and so on. So with that, they go searching for a ranger known as Greenblade, who is a bit of an expert on the wilderness in this area, particularly as they're right near Half-Light Forest, which is where he spends most of his time. So they went looking for him, and after some time they managed to find him. But by this time in session 2, I also had a third player to introduce. That is Dan with his character, the turquoise tiefling, Fleeting Look. Because of his backstory, it was quite easy to work him into the story. But again, you want to have an impactful introduction rather than having oh, and this person just joins you. I always think that's a bit unsatisfactory for new players. So it's nice to have an event, something that is a springboard, a catalyst for those characters coming together. So for this, it was quite easy because one of the things that I've been reading up about basilisks, because they have one very powerful ability, which is turning people to stone with their glare. And obviously, if that happens to one of the party members, they're in serious doo-doo unless they can get a greater restoration spell put on them, which is a very high-level spell, which none of them will have at this point. So I was looking up to see what else there is suggested as things that you can use. And one of the things that came up is cockatrices, because cockatrice, like the basilisks, also have a turn to stone ability, but theirs is through their beak. They bite something, and if the character fails a Constitution save, they then turn to stone, but only for 24 hours, not forever. And one of the other things I read as a suggestion, I think it was in the Monster Manual, was that cockatrice feathers can be boiled up and made into a balm, which can then be used to treat an area if you've been turned to stone. So I was, okay, this is great. Let's put this into the story. That makes sense. Let's use that. So what had happened was when they found Greenblade, he helped them fight a couple of cockatrices who were just venturing out of the forest and seemed to be quite aggressive towards the players. He then led them further into the forest to a clearing where there was a tiefling statue, a tiefling made entirely of stone, because it was of course Fleeting Look, and he'd been there for a day after he'd been nipped. So wanted to. So that was a nice way to bring him in, because then they had this. As it transpired, Fleeting Look had happened upon a nest of cockatrice eggs and had gone, this looks lovely, and then got turned to stone with his hand up in the air. So then when the players enter the clearing, so Greenblade, the NPC, plus Seth and Malar enter there, they're entering into a cockatrice nest. And of course, the remaining cockatrices are going to fight to the death to defend their nest, and that's exactly what they did. And another nice mechanic you have to that is then having Fleeting Look then appear during the combat, breaking out of the stone. And there was some really fun rolls with this one. This was just stuff that I came up with on the fly as well. So the first thing I did was I got Dan, Fleeting Look's player, to roll to roll a d10, and I was going to use this for the number of rounds it would be until he entered the combat. And he rolled an 8, so 10 minus 8 equals 2. So that means 2 turns, and then he'd enter in. That's how I worked that out. And then when he came to, and I was describing how this character who had just been wandering the woods, why they were there. They'd found this egg, and then suddenly everything just went to black. And then he's now got this light coming into his face, and then DK said, "Whoa, what is the light shining directly into his face?" Had not thought about that at all, and thought, you know what, I'll roll percentile dice, which is 2 d10s, roll them, and yeah, that gives you a score out of 100. And wouldn't you know it, I rolled exactly 100, which is crazy. So that's the 10 on both dice, that's 100. Yeah, so I was like, okay, yes, you're looking directly into the sun. Fun little moment, meant absolutely nothing, but it was just really fun to put that in there. So the guys then, mid-combat, Fleeting Look then comes in, takes his revenge, kills the last of the cockatrices and smushes all the eggs. And that's when Greenblade can then offer to assist, and he obviously also introduced the characters to creating a balm from cockatrice feathers and cockatrice remains, which, again, it's going to be very useful. Very limited time span it can be used in, but very useful nonetheless. So introduced that idea to them, and then in addition to that, there seems to be a lot with his past as well. And as Malar noticed, I made him roll for this when he brings out the blade, that basically Greenblade is actually a member of one of the noble houses of the Crowflies, not Grenforth, because he would have known that straight away, but another noble house nonetheless, or at least used to be, but is now in Burakrin for reasons unknown. And he basically, Greenblade obviously spoke quite well anyway. He was, quite obvious that he was of a noble background of some variety. He was actually, he had quite a simple motivation for helping the party. Rather than paying for his services to help find Lady Helene or even a basilisk, he just wanted a letter delivered for them. A letter, and again, that's another little plot hook, but a nice and easy one, a nice simple one. Seems quite clear cut, right? Just wants a letter. There's nothing ambiguous or weird about that, right? No, not at all. That we'll come back to hopefully in another session later on as well. But basically, he's a man of simple needs. Put it that way. So the three of them now then carry on. Decide they're going to head south. And in fairness, I did put this out. I hadn't actually thought about this, but heading south would be where they'd want to go. because that's where the ambassador potentially came from. So they want to retrace her steps. That makes total sense, and also to basically to retrace her steps, but also to look for other characters. And I did mention that was a village that way called Halfrach. I hadn't actually thought that far ahead as to what the ramifications of that would be. I was thinking that they were going to go to the village of Hilberg, which is actually north and then east, which I have started planning out, and that's what, in fact, that letter that Greenblade gave was meant to go to Hilberg, but that was in the wrong direction. That's not where where the players were going to go anyway. So I was like, okay, right, that makes sense. Like they're entirely justified for their view. Fine, let's go towards Halfrach, and and that just means that I've got this Hilberg stuff, which will then come back into play later. So it's a nice little mix. So they carried on further down the road, and they found. Again, after talking to Greenblade, who said there was this traveling trader called Tilda, and she was lovely, but a bit simple, and he sells the poultices to her. I had already thought about, but not officially planned out, another trader who was going on the road, who is as yet unnamed, but he spoke like this, and he'd been coming here for 3 years. And he was a lot of fun to play, just as this little comic relief character, but he ended up fleecing the players. Like, yes, he had health potions, which is obviously very useful, and according to I think it's in the player's handbook even, health potions are about 50 gold pieces. They're not cheap, even though, because they are, they literally sustain life. So he had a few of those there, and some other stuff, and the players definitely wanted some of his gear, but they weren't going to take it. Again, it was a morality test as well, to see where the players, how they play, see how they deal with these different social encounters. Malar was obviously trying to reason, and he ended up offering his chainmail armor because he doesn't use it, which makes sense because of Loxodons have this, basically have a natural trait of having tough hide, having a tough skin, so they have natural armor. So as starting as a cleric, you are given chainmail armor. He didn't need it, so he gave it away. And I only looked up afterwards that the chainmail was worth 1.5 times what a health potion is. So the trader got a good deal. He did well there. He also got some balm and some religious blessings from Malar as well. And Seth took it upon himself to exact his own justice in true rogue fashion of sneaking behind the cart while this was all happening and stealing another health potion. Just one, nothing too noticeable. And James was quite insistent. Definitely protested quite a lot about. Definitely stated quite clearly his reasons for doing it, and kept on saying his reasons for doing it. Yeah, feel free to compensate you for the chainmail later today. I will think about it. I mean, sometimes some trades you do better, some trades you do worse. If you've ever been to a market and then haggled on something, and you've come away and you've got, I thought I got a really good deal there, and then you realise what you got is absolute crap. It happens. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, so that was so much fun to bring that character in, and now I've got a trader wandering around the roads, wandering through the Rach Valley Road with chainmail armor on, that's like a dress because it was designed for Loxodon. It's just great because it means that character will I'm definitely bringing him back in later. Like, they will find him at some point. Gonna stick out quite a lot now with the chainmail dress on anyway, so that should be good fun. Anyway, they then, after that little respite, then ended up wandering further down the road, and they found the carriage of, I think it's safe to say now, the carriage of Ambassador Lady Helene Grenforth. It had the colours of the Grenforths, it had the logo on it, the emblem, the coat of arms for Grenforth on there, that's of a golden griffin. It's it was quite clearly her thing, but nobody there, and it was in fact outside of just at the sort of foothills of some mountains of the Ratgurit Mountains, just at the foothills of there, with it looked like a recent rockfall, and Seth, thinking on his feet, decided to check for footprints, and fair enough. Great, that was a great thing to do. I did have that planned for, but it's a good job that otherwise they would have had no idea. They'd be like, why is this carriage here with horses but no people around? So he retraced the footsteps and looked like they had gone inside what must be a cave. And in fact, the rocks had caved it in afterwards. The rockfall had happened after they'd entered. They tried to remove the rocks themselves, but interestingly, I had thought it was going to be a combined strength check and that they would go together and try and shift rocks. And I was going to, if they rolled high enough, I'd be like, okay, yeah, that would have worked. But they didn't work together, for one thing. I think James, as Seth, was just trying to do it on his own, trying to take some rocks out. And he didn't roll very well anyway. So I was like, well, rather than trying to skew things and go, okay, after some time you made this happen, I thought, actually, hang on, there's a fun little plot device in here. Okay, it doesn't happen. And they then decided, we're going to need help if we're going to go this way. And they decided to steal the carriage. There may be repercussions for that, but, I mean, if they're getting help, it may be fine. Anyway, decided to steal the carriage and ride it to Halfrach, because that would actually halve the time getting there, or lessen the time getting there, because they're going by carriage rather than walking. That makes total sense. I didn't think about that, but it makes total sense. So yeah, I let them do it because officially that's a vehicle. I had to, and none of them were land vehicle trained, because obviously with certain backgrounds, like the soldier background, you would be able to pilot that no problem, because you would have land vehicle proficiency. But because they didn't, and Seth decided he wanted to drive, I said, okay, you can have another animal handling check, because he's already done one with the horses to not spook them, and rolled a natural 20. Sure enough, he rolled really high again on an animal handling check for land vehicles. So it said, yep, okay, fine. So you the horses obey your commands, and you guys head on towards Halfrach, and that's where we left it for now. Little things that I seeded in there that I think may not have been completely clear so far in the campaign. Ooh, plot hooks. Well, one thing is that since Fleeting was awoken from his from being turned to stone, I did mention it, but it will come into play at the beginning of next session. Was that he had that basically from the effects of being turned to stone for 24 hours, like it seems like he's been awake for days, which is crazy. Where at the beginning of next session, he will suffer a point of exhaustion, because that's what would happen if you've been up for that amount of time. Like with all those events, he needs to have a proper rest, and that's something I think I will keep in there for later on. In fact, they're all going to suffer a point of exhaustion unless they go rest as soon as they get to against that. Thank you, Dan. Yes. The dagger that was mounted behind the bar, as noted in the first session. Yes, I nearly forgot about that. There's definitely a plot. There's definitely a plot hook there. I can't tell you about it, but there's definitely one there. That sword, I did mention when Malar was looking over the bar to try and find a bar towel. I noted then for him that there was a sort of a bone dagger behind the bar. Like a bone hilt, and I think it was black. I think it said black blade. And yes, it was quite ornate and quite fancy and displayed quite proudly behind the bar. But yes, definite plot hook there. Will come into play later. Also at the inn, we had Elenia Matiz, the elf, who was doing mage arm wrestling with Mace Flint. She's looking for her grandmother, who disappeared 200 years ago. Yep. It's not what you think. Elves obviously live for a long time anyway, but it was more that I think Elenia has accepted that her grandmother has passed away. She just wants to find out what happened to her, because her grandmother was an adventurer, and that she doesn't know what happened. She's looking for answers, essentially, which, I think if you're into your history and genealogy, why wouldn't you? That makes sense. So there's that little hook there as well. What happened to her? There's no plot hooks with Mace Flint. He's just there to antagonize and do bar brawls and have drinks with so far, but things may happen later. Greenblade, what's his real name for a start? Because Greenblade's just what he calls his called because of his sword, which has the green flame blade cantrip enchanted on the sword. So the green flame blade cantrip from Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide basically means that when you hit somebody with an attack, green fire then leaps off the blade and then hits somebody else within 5 feet. So he's got that on his sword. So every attack he makes with the sword, that happens, which is pretty cool. And also when you get to higher levels, the effects get more potent, which, you know, like with the cantrips, which is really good fun. So there's a little bit with that. Who does he want who does he want the letter delivered to? I think he must have said who he wanted yes, he did. He said there was a half-elf barmaid that he wanted it delivered to. And he also named his sword Henlath and just looked at it in a slightly too long, like a little bit too obsessed with your weapon there. That's not a euphemism. So there's that little plot hook going as well, and what's happening there. That's leading towards Hilberg. And you've got the guys heading to Halfrach who are looking. So the guys are now heading to Halfrach. They're looking for help. Still looking for a basilisk and an ambassador. Well, perhaps the two things will intertwine at some point. We shall see. But either way, it's I hadn't planned for Halfrach at all, but in hindsight, it made total sense why they went south. So it means that this week I've been then working out what Halfrach is as a village, like what's there and what denizens are there, the people that inhabit it. And safe to say, we've got, I think the players may end up spending the whole session in Halfrach on Monday. And I'm looking forward to it because I got a whole little adventure for that with some interesting goings on. I can't wait for it, and I hope you can't either. So as I said, this has been the first campaign diary and Q&A. I'll do another one of these same time next week following session 3. So get your questions in for that. You can get them in via social media. That's all at Slice and D6. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Also, you can message here on the chat with your questions. And before that, we'll have on Monday. That's when we're next streaming. Come and see for session 3, where the party enter Halfrach and we meet some new PCs. Now, there's 2 you will know of from the character creation session. That's Marta and Bart with their characters, Neris, the High Elf Sorcerer, and Brukon Rumbleguts Ree, the Dwarf Monk. Some quite eclectic characters will be joining the party on Monday's session. So join us for that. That's Monday, 6 p.m. British Standard Time, here on the channel on Slice and Dice. So that's session 3 of the Many Lands campaign. Until then, be safe. I've been Jack. I've been DMing, and I will be again on Monday. I hope you found this helpful and fun, and I'll speak to you again soon.